everybody, and welcome back to Barely Filtered. Today, the episode is going to be based around, is it me or is it my ADHD? So I know ADHD is kind of thrown out as just this topic that it's kind of like narcissism. Like everybody's a narcissist that you don't like, and everybody who can't get their shit together has ADHD. And, it's not true that a person with ADHD is often does have a hard time, quote unquote, getting their shit together. But there's actually a lot more to it than that. And I've kind of been studying up on it. I was first diagnosed. I was kind of treating myself in high school. I would literally just show up to a psychiatrist and be like, I have ADHD. They'd be like, do you have trouble focusing? I'm like, yes. Do you have to, you know how to answer all the questions in order to get what you think is the drug that's going to help you. And I was on Adderall for many years, and it ended up just kind of totally burning out my adrenals. I just feel like I aged 20 years in the years I was doing Adderall. It was way too powerful a stimulant for me. And it took me a long time to realize that it was actually causing more problems in my life. But it was interesting how effective it was at really treating my ADHD. And I went back and forth with my doctors for a while about okay, well, try a stimulant that's a little bit less. But I'm just so sensitive to them. They really don't work for me at all. They make me crave something to bring me back down, ground me. And that ended up looking like nicotine. So it was just this unhealthy cycle for me. And I ended up feeling totally burnt out from taking the Adderall. But in my adult years, I've learned how to cope with it pretty well. But it's interesting to see how it showed up in dating life and even just everyday life. You think that it's just kind of normal behavior. And then when I really start setting up on it, I realize, oh crap, that was my ADHD. And this is something that happened. This is something that I've noticed an ADHD mother might have to deal with. So this past weekend, it was my son's birthday, and we were in Palm Springs, and we were there with a couple of his best friends. We're on a traveling vacation with other families. These are families I like. I like the parents. I'm friends with them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have invited them. The problem with having kids and their friends is that sometimes the friendship of your child might not match the friendship that you have with the parent. I like the parent, but is their child good for my son, or is my son good for their son? So what ended up happening was my son Remy was in this same dynamic that he's always in with this one friend. And I know I sound like a delusional mother, but I've never had bad feedback about my son from a teacher, from a parent's friend, a friend's parent, from anybody. I've gotten bad feedback maybe from the nanny, my mom, people he's really close with. He has really big emotions and can be quite dramatic when he gets triggered. But he's one of those kids that's just you get him back and they're like, oh, he was a perfect angel. He's smart. He knows when to turn it on and turn it off. For whatever reason with this family, he is constantly triggered. And the fact is, her son antagonizes Remy to the point where he just can't take it anymore. And I see it happening. I really like her son. He's a spunky, really wild spirit, but he's the kind of kid you turn your back. And last year he's the kind of kid who puts his whole hand in the birthday cake in the other room when nobody's watching. That was last year. And also the kind of kid that will push somebody in the pool when you're not watching. Just he's got that sneaky spirit. Okay. I'm not saying anything bad about him. And I love his mom. However, his mom said to me, Remy has been very rude lately. He doesn't say please and thank you. And he taught my son how to swear. I've never heard Remy say swear in his life. Ever. No one's ever told me he swears before. And at the time, she's staying at my house. She's a good friend of mine. And I really like her. We're not super close. We've only hung out when our kids hang out. So she's not we've gotten closer over the years. But, she said this to me and it didn't really hit me until a few days later. And this is when I noticed this is an ADHD thing that I've done in other situations too. It's like you get feedback from somebody, and in an effort to keep the peace, you kind of just take responsibility and kind of just, I think what I said to her was, wow, like, thank you for letting me know. I'm definitely going to talk to him about that. And then I even like talked to Remy about it, and he got very defensive and was like, I never did that. Like he's already kind of on edge with this friend because he is always getting blamed for things. This friend is just kind of like always tattling on him, or just there's just always some like drama that's never with any other friend. And anyway, so she gave me this feedback, and in my head, like right away, I'm just like, okay, I think I kind of felt like she maybe knew that it was her son that was causing a lot of these issues, and in an effort to make herself feel better, that it's not all her son's fault, she kind of just had to like tell me that my son sucks. I mean, that's what I heard. What I heard from her was just that my son was rude and that he's a bad influence on her son. And it didn't hit me until a couple days later. And then, like, the more I think about that dynamic and what she said to me, the more angry I get, and I'm spiraling in my head, and I'm overthinking, and I'm making it a bigger deal in my head. And this is something that I always do. Like, somebody will give me some kind of feedback or criticism, or there's some kind of a conflict in the moment, and then I kind of smooth it over so that it doesn't become a big thing. I feel like I take on responsibility that I'm not really sure about if it's mine or not. And then later, slowly, gradually, I ruminate and obsess on it. And then I end up either confronting or totally cutting that person off. But either way, my response feels like exaggerated for the situation. So in this situation, the ADHD brain sometimes has working memory deficit. And this is so our working memory is your brain's ability to hold information temporarily, manipulate that info while doing something else, and stay focused on it without losing track. So it's like a mental Post-it note. And with ADHD, that Post-it note is like half stuck, smudged, and blowing away in the wind. And how it showed up there is a conversation when someone's giving me criticism. So this Playdate incident where I'm trying to kind of track my own kid's behavior, manage my own feelings, and remember what actually happened. And the mom friend saying that my son was rude, and I'm trying to keep calm and recall the context and not overreact. So I just kind of like smooth it over, and because I can't really process exactly what's happening. And I like to try to be as fair as possible. Like, I think probably everybody intends to be that way, but I really try to see all sides of things. And I think with an ADHD brain, it's hard to do that in the moment when you have a lot of different things that you're trying to consider at once. And then add on the fact that she's not talking about me, she's talking about my son, who I'm wired to be the most fiercely protective of. So it's just this very overwhelming dynamic. Then I'm feeling really guilty on top of it for not protecting like my son's reputation in a way, like more fiercely. And I'm kind of just like at this crossroads of what do I do exactly? And I think that shows up in friendships a lot too, where it's like you don't know if you're protecting your peace, if you're holding a firm boundary, or if you're or maybe if it's you. I don't know if anybody's experienced anything like that before, but that's something that I am currently dealing with and noticing how it's showing up in the form of ADHD. Also, like when you're about to get your period and your hormones are, going through the luteal phase, ADHD symptoms can become worse. And that's what I've kind of noticed too. I'm like, oh my God, why am I obsessing about this? And like Zach, my boyfriend, and even my mom and my ex-husband, everybody here. That's the thing. Like when one of these things is happening, you're going to hear about it from me. Like all my close friends are going to hear about it from me because I feel like I really need to like it happened to me with my divorce too. Actually, I think they call it like verbal diarrhea, where you just have to go over the situation 500 times to try to like gain some kind of control over it. And it doesn't really help except just to exhaust you. And then with our brains just kind of conflating everything, you end up almost not knowing if you can trust your own version of the reality after a bit, because you feel a little bit like you've lost it. And that's kind of where I am today. So there's the phenomenon of the working memory deficit, where you literally can't take in everything that's happening in a moment. And so you kind of just push it aside and bank it to worry about later. It's almost like procrastination. And then there's the impulsivity side of ADHD. And most people with ADHD have both. So as I'm explaining these topics to my manager, she's like, okay, well, why are you so snappy at me, basically? And mind you, she and I have known each other for a long time. And we're like basically kind of like have almost a sister dynamic. She can be very pushy. She's not here right now, so I'm going to say that about her. And I am snappy with her. And like nobody would ever say like, oh, Aurora is very non-confrontational, or Aurora, like for me to say this working memory deficit, I think most people who know me would be like, oh, Aurora always like isn't afraid to speak her mind. And it's not that I'm afraid, not that I was afraid to speak my mind then. It's that I felt dizzy with not being able to make sense of everything at once. And I didn't feel like prepared enough to say something because it's such a touchy subject. And but when you're comfortable with somebody like a family member, a boyfriend, somebody that you're married to, you can be like really impulsive with your reactions. On one hand, you have this working memory deficit where when there's like a lot of tabs in your brain open for a complex situation where you're trying to manage the feelings of other people and yourself, and you feel like you can't process it quickly enough to respond adequately. So you just kind of brush it off and then end up hardcore ruminating on it later. There's that. And then there's the impulsive response where you respond very quickly without really taking into consideration the consequences or all of the parts being played at one time. And it kind of seems like they're the opposite, but they play off of each other. It's either one or the other. It's rare that like an ADHD brain will give a thoughtful response in the moment. And it's not because they are inconsiderate or flaky or all the things that people might call an ADHD person. It's really because there are so many tabs open in their brain that it's not possible for them to consider all sides of the situation and respond in a given moment. So that's and it's a nuanced thing, because the impulsive response, I think, can happen more often. Like think about your prefrontal cortex when that's the decision making part of your brain. Like a child with ADHD will more often react impulsively, but an adult will probably have a little bit of both. I think my impulsive reactions happen more with people that I'm comfortable with. It depends on the situation. Like if it's where I feel like I'm being called out in public, where I feel like I'm being disrespected by somebody who I know well, I will most likely be impulsive with my response. And then I use the edit feature on text a lot because I just send things and then I go back and edit them. So this is something that like, it's interesting to know about yourself, because it really helps me to understand that some of the ways that I can behave can be adjusted. And there's things that you can do to help that. It also takes some of the edge off, because there's a lot of suffering that goes with ADHD. Like there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I read that almost 80% of people with ADHD have this. And it's when your brain has an extreme emotional reaction to any perceived rejection, criticism, disapproval, or failure, even if it's super subtle or totally imagined. So it's very common in ADHD because our brains are wired for emotional intensity and often struggle with self-worth regulation. So this is an interesting topic to explore when it comes to dating, because I remember I asked Jillian Turecki on my podcast, maybe it was hers, no, my podcast. I asked her, how come sometimes getting rejected by somebody who maybe you've dated for 2 weeks can feel more painful than getting rejected by somebody who you've dated for a few years? And I think it's this phenomenon of rejection sensitivity dysphoria, where you feel kind of just totally misunderstood, and the rejection is totally disproportionate to the relationship that you had, the depth of the relationship that you had with this person. But for some reason, your self-worth is so wrapped up in their perception of you, because you feel like for much of your life, you've been really misunderstood. And I never thought of myself as somebody who has felt misunderstood. Like I feel like, I've always had a lot of friends, and I've always felt kind of like a leader in one way or another. But when I think about it, it's like the names that they call people with ADHD are flaky, often late, lazy, unreliable. And you don't realize how that affects your subconscious from even such a young age, to be kind of like maybe the kid who's always late because ADHD is genetic. It's like one of your parents probably has it too and made you late for everything. Or the kid who always forgets their homework or is just scattered. Like, I've gotten feedback like that for my whole life. And you almost have to work double in order for people to look at you as somebody who is a productive member of society. Usually people with ADHD can hyper focus on something that they're interested in, but it's really hard for them to complete tasks that are not keeping their brain really stimulated. So for me, I am like a task master running around town and doing errands and stuff, but like just sitting down and working on a computer is really hard for me unless I have somebody sitting there. And that's a whole something called mirroring. And it's pretty amazing because I never knew what that was. But if I have just a friend sitting there, not helping me, not doing anything, but it helps me so much to focus on my work, because the brain just needs that bit of stimulation. And yeah, so that's something that I've noticed too. But I feel like going back to the dating thing with getting rejected by somebody that you feel doesn't really know you, I think it ties so deeply into that feeling of being misunderstood by society. And I think that it hurts more with somebody that you're not able to kind of show your whole self to, like that you weren't given a chance for them to get to know you better. And they only could see maybe the things on the surface that you might be insecure about. Tell you what some of the things that I've learned on the internet from this. And it can show up like someone doesn't text you back and you assume they're annoyed with you, or you sense a shift in tone during a conversation and you are kind of spiraling about it and blow it out of proportion. You get neutral feedback and it feels like bad feedback. A mom mentioned something about your child and suddenly you're deep in shame and rage at the same time. So all of that really resonates with me. Something that I've noticed in my dating life is shape-shifting into the cool girl or low maintenance version of myself so that I won't be rejected. I feel like I was able to do that for a pretty long time before like marrying my ex. And I think what happened with that is when you're trying to be the cool girl and low maintenance and people pleaser, you can only keep it going for so long, but sometimes you can keep it going for actual years. And then what ends up happening is this built up energy inside you for not being seen. And then you become hyper nitpicky and hyper needy and hyper just unhappy with little things, where I feel like if you were being true to yourself, if I was being true to myself from the start, it wouldn't have happened that way. So in dating, you might overlook red flags or hold in your needs so you don't seem clingy or dramatic. Definitely have done that. You get ghosted and immediately think it's because you talk too much, you weren't hot enough, you seem too emotional, etc. That did happen to me once, but ghosting is that topic. I feel like anybody who can just ghost is the psychopath. Because if you can ghost, it doesn't matter anything that I did, you're the more psychotic one of the two of us. Or even worse, you try to pre-reject yourself first by pulling away before they have the chance to leave you. And I've seen that before in my friends who have ADHD. I don't know that that's something I've done, but I know that feeling. In motherhood, it can be someone says something about your kid and it feels so personal, like they're judging you as a mom, as a mother, as a person. I feel like this is not an ADHD thing exclusively. It feels like, I mean, maybe it's worse for people with ADHD, but I just know as a parent, your kids feel like such an extension of you that anything somebody says about them feels like an attack on you. And I've definitely felt that with my parents. Just, you guys know, like my vacation stories with my parents and stuff. I've only ever felt judged probably by them. And then most recently by this woman who I really feel like needs to take a look at her own situation. But you start rethinking everything. Like, am I raising a difficult kid? Am I not doing enough? Am I the problem? It's really exhausting. Like the mental load of trying to, I think when you're somebody who really wants to be fair and to see all sides of things and have a just and like equitable resolution to things, it's hard to do when you have so many tabs open in your brain and so many things to consider. And I think that also is why that guy who dumped you after 2 weeks is so much more painful, because you don't have the opportunity to have that resolution that gives you peace. And I think that's kind of something that somebody with ADHD is always chasing, is that feeling of resolution, completion. And it's such a hard, exhausting feeling to have so many thoughts and so many open tabs, but no real conclusion at the end of every day or every situation that you're in. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria says can often trigger masking, impulsivity. So masking was when you're pretending to be cool and pretending nothing cares, nothing bothers you. And it also can cause your working memory to freeze. So maybe that's what I was experiencing with that friend's mom. I think when she tried to blame my son for this dynamic, I felt triggered as the parent. I felt personally attacked by it. I masked because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable in my house over the weekend, rather than having an impulsive reaction. And that's the working memory freeze. I was like kind of spiraling about, I don't really know what to say because maybe she is right. And then so froze there, and then we all come home, and now I'm ruminating and spiraling. That is pretty much the loop of hell that is ADHD. And you can either react quickly and emotionally, that's the impulsivity, or you can shut down and say nothing, which is freeze. You can replay it for days, obsess over how you were perceived, that's rumination. And you can apologize, explain, shrink, or try to make it right, even when you didn't do anything wrong. I definitely am a want to make it right person. I hate having situations that are unresolved. I would almost rather take the blame and have things resolved than keep it open. It usually takes me a few days to feel like I'll take the blame, but I can get there. I don't know. Okay, so this is what can help now that I've said all the things that kind of might be showing up in your life if you have ADHD, or maybe you notice it in one of your loved ones or your friends. So label it in real time. So you can say, okay, this might be my rejection sensitivity dysphoria. My brain is reacting before I've had time to check on the facts. That's something that my life coach has kind of worked with me on too. Like, she'll say to me, what do you know to be true in this moment with this situation? What do you know to be true? And oftentimes the stories that you're creating in your head, really, you don't have the facts to back it up. And that's also like the book that I told you guys to read by Byron Katie called Loving What Is, the 4 questions that can change your life. So she basically introduces her method for identifying and questioning stressful thoughts through 4 simple questions. And of course, the first question that she asks is it true? And how many things in our brain, like I'm going on and on ruminating in my head about this woman and how she doesn't like my kid and blah, blah, and she thinks it's but like, what do I actually know to be true? She told me that my son was being rude to her at her house. I wasn't there. Have I ever seen my son be rude before? Yes, I have. Have I ever seen him be rude to another parent? No, but is it possible that this was the first time and maybe this did happen? Yes. And the only thing I can do is believe what she's telling me, but make a choice as a parent to protect my son and make sure that next time if I choose to be in this dynamic with them, that I'm there, because I need to be able to see what's happening for myself rather than go by hearsay of another parent. So her first question is it true? And usually you can find within yourself pretty quickly, yes, it's definitely true without a doubt, in which case it's true and you need to take it from there, either move on or do something about it. Your options become a little bit more simple. Question number 2, can you absolutely know it's true? So she's asking you again, look deeper, because oftentimes like the impulsive response is, yeah, it's true. Like she slandered me or blah, blah, blah. It's an emotional reaction. Think about it a little bit more deeply, come back to it. Can you absolutely know it's true with 100% certainty? And then number 3 is how you react. What happens when you believe that thought? So like if I'm choosing to believe right now that this woman thinks my son is a menace, how does that make me feel? She's asking me to tune into my body and really try to notice, how does that make me feel? And if I'm really honest with myself, it makes me feel like I'm failing as a parent. Because she hasn't done any, my son is unaffected. She hasn't done anything to him. She didn't discipline him. He's fine. But really, when I think about it, it's the pain that I feel from her. Basically what I'm feeling is that she's telling me my parenting is bad. And it's interesting when you really stop and think about why do I actually feel this way? And what's the truth behind that? And then number 4, who would you be without that thought? And this one is one that's a little bit harder to wrap your head around, but it's like all the ways that, like when I choose to believe that this woman thinks I'm a bad parent, it makes me feel small. It makes me feel shrunk. It makes me feel angry. It makes me feel like I need to defend myself. So those are all bad feelings. So who would I be if I chose not to believe that thought? If I chose to believe that maybe she really doesn't think I'm a bad parent, because I really don't have proof of that. Maybe she just thinks that my son was rude at her house. Maybe she doesn't think maybe she actually thinks I'm a great parent. So if I choose not to believe the thought that I have come to the conclusion of with really no facts behind it, I feel lighter, happier, freer. And basically what Byron Katie is asking us is, we have the choice to believe what we want in any given situation. So you don't have to let yourself feel small and shrunk by a reality that really you don't have 100% certainty is true. Other things that can help when you feel like maybe you're having rejection sensitivity dysphoria, you can talk to someone safe. I do find that to be helpful. What I find to be very annoying is when I'm in this mode and then somebody's playing devil's advocate. Like I have this one friend who I just will never call. She'll be like, oh, well, did you think about seeing it this way? And I'm like, when you're in that mode, you don't want to see it the other way. And you just want somebody to be like, yes, you're right. This must feel really bad. Or she's totally wrong 100%. And, ultimately you just have to keep replaying that in your own head until you're exhausted from it. That's what I've done, but there's a better way to do it. And that is by going through those 4 steps that I just read to you before. You can use body-based grounding tools. Maybe this is why I've been so obsessed with yoga for a lot of my life, because I do feel like really grounding is such a helpful tool. You can do yoga, you can do breath work, even just things like getting a massage or going for a walk, having your feet planted, things that are physically grounding you to the earth. Yoga, you do a lot of palms and feet on the earth. And it just helps to instill this safety in you that you and your head and all these flighty information that you're coming up with and spiraling. It's not all of you. And it's only a part of you, and that the rest of you can still feel good. Your body can still feel good and not be super. You can still have your body feel good and not let your mind affect it, but it's a practice. And for me, I think yoga has really helped with that. You can affirm yourself. So saying something like, this reaction is valid, but it doesn't mean I'm bad. I'm allowed to take up space, things like that. So rejection sensitivity isn't about being fragile. It's about having a brain that feels everything deeply and immediately and not always knowing what to do with it. But the more you understand it, the more power you have to protect your peace, your truth, your identity. So you're not too sensitive. You're just finally learning not to abandon yourself. I like that quote. I think that it's true. And And I just think it's a tough thing to navigate because, people with ADHD have never had a different brain than the one they have now. So we don't know any other way that reality should feel. And I think this information has just really helped me with dating. But in terms of, social, I think the universe like keeps presenting you with different versions of the same type of problem until you learn how to solve it. And I think I've been presented with rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria in my dating life, in, my relationship with my parents. And I think now, it's starting to come up in my parenting life. And I guess I haven't mastered it yet because I'm still here like spiraling out about something that somebody said about one of my kids. So I'm going to try to work on that with some of the tools that I have. And just right now, I'm like still a little torn on whether to address it directly and be like, listen, I don't really think our kids are good for each other right now. And, I take it very seriously that you have this feedback for me about my son. I think maybe they should not play together. I can either like address it like that, or I could just kind of disappear and not be available for play dates, which to me feels like an open tab, which is annoying. But when I ask my friends, they're like, no, you don't have to address it. They feel like addressing it is too aggressive, where the better thing to do would be kind of just to disappear. Like my mom told me just disappear. My other friend told me just disappear. Mike is like, oh, I'm going to bring it up to her next time I see her. I'm like, I don't know if that's really the good thing either to do. So it's hard. I don't know. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to my very scattered ADHD recap of my weekend. And I know that a lot of these words a lot of this ADHD jargon that I brought up is new to you, and I'm just learning about it too. But I do feel that it's been helpful for me to have a name for things that I've experienced in my life. And I think if I had known about things like rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, mirroring, that's the one where you kind of are, masking. That's the one where you're kind of just trying to people please. And the impulsivity or working memory deficit, and then this phenomenon of just spiraling and ruminating. I think I would have been a little more gentle with myself and probably feel a little less shame around it, having this understanding that it's actually just the way my brain is operating the best it can. And honestly, it's just trying to come to the most fair conclusion, which is pretty honorable. So if you're feeling any of these things, just know that you're not alone, and there's so many tools for you. Actually, I just started using this app. They are not sponsoring the podcast, but maybe they will after I plug them right now. Hold on. Please hold. Now my Instagram is just like all, of course, ADHD. Oh yeah, here it is. So it's called Inflow, INFLOW. And it's basically an app that helps you kind of break down your day, break down the things that ADHD might be. It helps you to break down the different parts of your life that might be affected by your ADHD and help you work past them. Things like procrastination or time management or ruminating. They actually have like a chat robot in there too, where they will help you break down certain situations. So it's almost like Chat GPT, but specifically for ADHD topics, which is kind of cool. So that's been helping me. I just started a couple days ago, but I think it's pretty fun. I don't know. So let me know in the comments or on my Instagram what you are struggling with lately in terms of your ADHD and what has been helping you. And hopefully we can just all get better together.